order, please. First item of business is requests for bill introductions. Do we have any requests today? Seeing none, we will move on to our first hearing of the day. It's a hearing on House Bill 2186. We'll open up the hearing and first turn to the revisor's office for an overview. While he's heading to the microphone, committee, if it's deja vu all over again, we did have a hearing on this last year. It's the 3-factor to single-factor apportionment, and just wanted to have another hearing this year before we actually considered the bill, just to refresh. It is a little bit complicated, so just want to make sure everybody was comfortable with the content of the bill. Mr. Siebers, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As stated, House Bill 2186 would allow a taxpayer to elect to apportion income based on the sales factor alone rather than the current 3-factor apportionment. Election would be available to only businesses engaged in manufacturing, production of electricity, or storage of electricity in certain agricultural activities. Taxpayers would be allowed to choose the election for apportionment by including a statement on their tax return. This election will be available for 10 years then. It will be in effect for 10 years. It will be binding on a unitary group of corporations. However, the Secretary of Revenue may shorten the duration on the remaining years of the election as approved by the Secretary. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Could you explain that last part a little bit, and perhaps the Department of Revenue could further when they review the fiscal note, but you said the Secretary could elect to shorten that 10-year provision?
Well, I may have misspoken a little bit. The Secretary can terminate the election, so it would go back to the normal 3-factor instead of this election under a single factor. So it would, there'd be a 10-year period, but the Secretary could terminate that, with approval or with agreement of the company and go back to the 3-factor.
Okay. And this is on a per company basis. It's not something that is automatic. It's optional on per company whether they want to change, correct?
Correct. It'd be an election, so they would have the option to either keep the current 3-factor or go to this single factor.
Very good. Thank you. Committee, are there any questions for the revisor? Seeing none, thank you for that overview. This time, I'd welcome Department of Revenue to review our fiscal note, please.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Kansas Department of Revenue. When we prepared this fiscal note back in 2021, we estimated that the state general fund would decrease by around $20.5 million in fiscal year 2022. I would assume that if we worked this, that the dates would probably move forward. So we'd probably move into fiscal year 2023. In formulating that estimate, we looked at our top corporate income filers and then limited it to those categories that were specifically provided for in the bill. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. One question I had is, as we consider, is it fairly easy if there are others that are wishing to be included by their NAICS codes? Is it pretty easy to get an updated fiscal note, or what the impact would be on that addition?
It is fairly easy with the information that we have at this point. For tax year 18, this is what this fiscal note is based on. Tax year 19, we're starting to try and update that. We have to go into each individual return, though, because some of that information is not captured. So it is going to take us a little bit longer. And one other thing that I would like to note on the industry codes or on the NAICS, those are self-reported, and so we're assuming that the individual or the companies are reporting their NAICS correctly, and it could be for the main company and not for all of the subsidiaries that are included in that combined return. So it may not accurately reflect what is actually going on in the company.
Okay, thank you. Committee, are there any questions for the department? I just had one last question. Does your fiscal note anticipate that all of those that are eligible would change, or was there a proportionate factor, maybe half that would elect this, or?
I can't, I could go back and get that information for you. I'm not sure that all of them. We did try to find what was beneficial for these companies, and I'm not sure what the percentage was that made that election based upon our simulation. So I can get that information for you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, do you know how big the biggest employer in Kansas is? Like, I don't know who they are, so I'm just curious, like top 5, what the employment number would look like, or how, like what their revenue would be?
I think probably the Department of Labor would have the employment numbers as to who the biggest corporations are in the state.
Okay. Do you know what the threshold would be for like revenue-wise, or is that, I guess?
I do not,
sensitive? Okay.
no.
No worries. Thank you.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen. This time we will open up proponent testimony. We have appearing before the committee today, Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Eric Stafford, Vice President of Government Affairs with the Kansas Chamber. Just maybe a 2023 legislative change for you guys to consider is for folks from the gallery is walk-up music to kind of like baseball when you're walking up to bat. Everybody has a theme song, and I don't know what mine is yet, but we'll think of it. Appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 2186. As the chairman stated, this was heard last year, and just I'm going to go through some of our comments that I said last year just as a refresher, but how this bill came about and why we are supportive of it today. So our Vision 2025 plan is focused on what can we do to help grow the state at a faster economic rate than what we have been over the last few decades. Part of that process was funding the research by the Tax Foundation for the tax modernization study that they performed for the state. Tax Foundation is pretty agnostic on single factor versus 3-factor apportionment. They said, there's advantages and disadvantages to each. Through that study and through our work groups and discussions over what items to pursue, what do we want to prioritize for our membership before the legislature, was this and the decoupling bill that was passed last year. So that took priority, and then this was kind of a leftover item that unfortunately didn't get through, but wanting to get this done this year. So this idea came about in fall of 2019. Single factor apportionment is something that's been discussed for years. You have seen a dramatic shift in how states apportion corporate income taxes in their states. Single factor used to be the exception, and now if you read our testimony and look at the chart included on page 2 of our testimony, you'll see that Kansas, I think, is one of 6 states that uses the 3-factor approach. So the main driver behind that is that basically as you invest significantly into a state and capital investment manufacturing facilities, the 3-factor approach, especially on the property side, inflates the tax liability of the business. So not all of our members want single factor apportionment. So that is why this proposal is up to the taxpayer to help with the fiscal note to avoid, giving any taxpayer the election and leaving Department of Revenue saying, well, we don't know how many people are going to use this, and want to, trying to give a little bit tighter scope for Department of Revenue to be able to estimate what the potential financial impact would be to the state. Opt in, but only for those industries who are asking for it. So that's why it was drafted as narrowly as it was. But we didn't want to force people into that position because each industry is unique in what their perspective would be. But so Tax 101, what is the current 3-factor approach? You take the sales, you take the property, and you take the payroll of the business to help apportion that income, their total income, for the 50 states, and they're doing that in the other states too, but then comparing that to the single factor approach that looks at the sales. So there's some that weight sales. You see in that chart too, there's like a sales 50%, plus 50%. So there's different approaches states have taken, but by and large, over the last 10 years or so, there's been a big push by states to shift toward single factor apportionment to encourage capital investment within their state and not penalize those that have chosen to have a bigger footprint within the state that they're operating in. So that is kind of the background on the bill. The proposed amendments, so in our testimony from the written comments, you'll see at the very top of page 2, there were some industry inputs that were asking to be included that were not in the initial draft that kind of came on board late. So it's NAICS codes 541690, that's other scientific and technical consulting services for biofuel facility. NAICS code 112210, that's hog farming under certain agricultural activities. 424700, that's wholesale distribution for petroleum products, and then NAICS code 424100, and that's wholesale trade. So some other inputs that have been recommended. If there's support by the committee, if this bill is going to go forward, also just kind of a technical piece on the end of page 3, there's language that reads under the NAICS codes as designated by the Secretary of Department of Labor. That's kind of an oversight. Department of Labor doesn't oversee the NAICS codes, so as designated by Secretary of the Department of Labor can be deleted. That was something that we caught yesterday on a conference call with our membership. But those additional codes were folks that reach out to us saying, hey, we'd love to be included in this. But again, trying to take the approach to help Department of Revenue determine the fiscal impact to the state, but also realizing that we're supportive of a taxpayer election because our membership isn't unanimous on what approach they would like to take. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you all have on the bill and why we introduced it, and appreciate your support, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Yes, Representative Helgerson.
Mr. Stafford, I appreciate you being here. Just one question. I'm looking at the fiscal note, and it's $20,500,000. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah.
Is there anything else we can do for you to make it more advantageous in Kansas to help business?
Anything more you can do?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can look at corporate income tax rates. We can look at income tax rates, sales tax. Yeah, I'd love the. Is that a softball or what, Mr. Chairman?
I think it would be good to suggest those ideas to the legislature after that last vote. Thank you.
Well, oh, the floor vote?
Yeah, I am dead serious. So.
Well, is it? Are we dealing with a rhetorical question, or am I at liberty to answer?
Actually, if you look back at the record, 20 or 30 years ago, I introduced the legislation, proposed that we should eliminate the corporate income tax and use EDIF. I think the legislature's made a policy decision about what we should be doing to help corporations come and locate. And I think actually when you look at the competition that's now going to go on in the state for people by bringing in 8,000 new jobs or whatever it is, you're going to have a hard time keeping the corporations, the employees that we have. So I'm being dead serious. You bring me a bill and recommendation and I'll introduce it.
Well, thank you. And I think that I think you're spot on. And we brought those comments up in the hearing on the Apex bill that there are some questions on incentives themselves. And should we focus on tax code or should we focus on incentives? And I think that the answer I gave to the Senate Commerce Committee when that question was posed was they're not mutually exclusive. We need to do both. You have states that are, the quote unquote tax code model of Florida or Texas. They have incentives as well. But we have a mediocre tax policy. We need to have incentives to compete. There's some improvements. I don't know if I've shared with this committee yet when I've had the chance to testify. maybe I did, that we had a 10-spot jump in the tax foundation for our overall business climate ranking based on the legislation that passed last year. So we went from 34th best overall to 24th best overall. Huge improvement. There's still more to be done. There's still more that's not accomplished in our tax foundation modernization report for the Kansas tax code. Yeah, eliminating corporate income tax, or even if we went to, got rid of the surcharge and just went to, you know, a 4% flat corporate income tax, I think we'd be second lowest in the nation behind North Carolina. That's on path to phase theirs out. They're at 2 3/4 or 3%, something like that. But 4%, that'd be very, very competitive. But as you start to look at overall structure, I mean, we do have record revenues. We're not unique in that sense for the state of Kansas. Every state's experiencing record revenue growth, largely generated because of the spending at the federal level under the pandemic response. But is that money, you got to be cautious, because when does that money disappear, or does it ever, because there's so much money now floating out there. But does the value go away? All things you have to weigh when looking at what to do. But yeah, we would definitely support overall rate reduction. Corporate income tax is important. I appreciate what the Senate did. We appreciate what the Senate did by putting the reductions in there. And obviously there are some problems with the language that you on the House side all fixed. But it's a start. And, you know, if that program draws more businesses in, that's a good thing.
Mr. Stafford, I had a question. Could you pose a theoretical company? Because looking at this list, I know we've got some of our neighbors, Colorado, Missouri, Nebraska, that are at the single factor. Could you just give the committee kind of a general theoretical company that, I guess I'm trying to get, how does Kansas being a 3-factor help or hurt certain businesses that might have another state, neighboring state, that they'd have a facility in, or employees that has a single factor?
Yeah, and good question, Mr. Chairman. And I thought I could get to it quickly in my history here. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Real quick, so we have included in there manufacturing, sections 31 through 33 of NAICS codes. So you have animal food manufacturing, dog and cat food manufacturing, grain and oilseed milling, flour milling, but then you go down and there's frozen specialty food manufacturing. So there are, manufacturing's broad. There are, you look at energy, the energy producers, wind generation facilities, capital physical investments is, you know, McPherson, you have Pfizer there, you have, gosh, what's the name of the other manufacturer right off of 135? But yes, they're the manufacturing facilities. I think Spirit would fall under there, but I don't know, they haven't weighed in on this, so I don't know where they would be on this bill. But you have a variety of industries, but largely those with capital investments within the state. That's what's driven the argument that started this 10, 15 years ago of that national shift. You know, most states, we modeled our language off of New Mexico. Most states are not an election. We have switched to single factor. Missouri was an election for a while, and I think just within the last year or two, they switched to, we're no longer doing election, we're going single factor all the way. So, but that was an exchange. I think that was going to raise some revenues, but they used that revenue to buy down corporate income tax rates. So Missouri's lowered their rates to be more competitive.
Okay, thank you. Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up, Mr. Chairman, from your question, which is a good one. Eric, for example, let's take, I think one of the NAICS codes you just talked about was frozen, refrigeration, food.
Yeah. Flavoring syrup and concrete manufacturing is one that's in here.
Okay. I mean, but for example, I'm just trying to go, Representative Sanders and I were talking earlier about the Swans plant in Salina. So you could take, to me, they would fit probably under this NAICS code.
Under manufacturing, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, in the bill, it's the entire sections 31 through 33 of manufacturing not specific manufacturing. So that one is more broad. There are others, as we mentioned in our testimony, some that were left out, but some that are currently listed today, that it is a one industry code specific, because those are the ones that we've specifically heard feedback from as wanting to be included.
Well, I guess, Mr. Chairman, I'm just, I'm trying to get how that would impact, let's say, for example, a Swans in Salina. Because they do produce, they sell out of state, they have a lot of payroll, a lot of property here in Kansas. It'd be great to compare three-factor, taking Swans, for example, and how it would impact them versus going to a one-factor formula sales. Just, it might be interesting to the committee to have some numbers, some actual examples how that would impact the company.
Yeah, and that is a good point. And I don't know what the impact would be. To that point, like, I know one industry we've heard from our membership that does not want to be included is telecom, because they do have a lot of property. They have their towers, cell phone towers, but then they have a lot of sales. They have a lot of payroll. So they like that three-factor approach to apportion among, because they are operating in all 50 states. I mean, AT&T or T-Mobile, those carriers, they're everywhere, but they have all three components everywhere too. So yeah, it is unique, but yeah, what the actual financial impact is, each company's going to have to weigh it. But I think the question that was asked about the 10-year piece, that was put in more to prevent an annual, it's better for us this year, but we're going to go back over here to the three-factor approach next year because of whatever tax advantage we get. We want to try to avoid that jumping and say, hey, you're going to be locked in for 10 years to provide consistency to the state. And if you're choosing to elect, we're going to keep you in there. So,
Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric, looking at your testimony, you have listed out the states. And I believe it also says if different states basis their factors, if they can elect, maybe like single or three-factor. To me, it looks like there's only, 4 or 5 that give people an option to do both. Would you agree with that? Or multiple options instead of just saying, here's your one that you're going to go by?
I think there used to be, and I'm going to have to research that. New Mexico might be the only remaining election state.
Okay.
Let me confirm that, though.
Okay.
I'll confirm that. Like I said, Missouri used to be.
And I guess my point being is, do you think it's fair business practice or fair tax policy that companies would be able to pick and choose which is more advantageous to them as opposed to doing a blanket one? Because it looks like nationwide it's more, Kansas can be competitive if we go single sales factor, but to me it might seem like we're at a disadvantage if we just give away an option to say, do you want to do single or three-factor?
I think each business's circumstance is unique, and so that's why there's the election approach. But again, the main driver and motivator as to why to give that option is for those that have a heavy capital investment within the state. They're operating different than the service industry that is focusing more on sales and payroll than they are property. So I think it's more to address those that have made significant capital investments in the state and are here and want to grow and invest more, but having such a big number on the property side is disadvantageous to them. So it's more, trying to find ways that would generate investment in the state. So I don't know if that answers your
I'm with you.
question or not.
I'd have another comment, but I'll leave it at that. So I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.
Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said that you would prefer it to be, there be a choice as to businesses that want to use this SSF factor or not. So when we look at the fiscal note that we received, I'm assuming that was based on everyone was under that proposal. If we gave a choice, I would assume the fiscal note would be much higher because no doubt each business would choose the one that saves them the most money. Am I not correct about that?
Yes, but it doesn't, I don't think everybody will save money by switching to single factor. And only carving out specific industries is probably why the fiscal note isn't as high as what it could be if you just went to it. I think if you would go based on, again, don't quote me, based on what I've seen happen in other states, what I've read, if you switch to single factor, you would see a significant increase in your corporate income tax revenue, and that's why Missouri's brought theirs down, or you would see an increase. But I think again, from our members' perspective, not everybody wants to be included in that approach. So that's why we did that election model, since there were some other states that had that in place, and two, targeting only specific industries to try to keep the fiscal note from getting too high.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In your experience, we talked about the other states that have had election. Do you see if Kansas goes down this road, eventually we would become a single factor state without the election?
I won't be the one to propose it to our membership, but to be where we are with this is a big change from where we were, 2008, 9, 10. Our members said, because this was brought up by my predecessor as something, hey, this is something we're seeing, whether it's Tax Foundation or other Council on State Taxation, this is a trend that we're seeing nationally. Do we as a membership have interest? And at that time it was no. So the fact that we've now morphed into making this transition to single factor, I think that's a real possibility. And I haven't talked to our counterparts in Missouri to see if it was that their sentiment or experience, but the fact that we've made this shift, it's a legitimate question is, well, maybe that happens in the future. I don't know. But it is a shift from where we were in 2010, 2011, that's for sure.
Okay. Committee, are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Stafford. That is the only verbal proponent. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as a proponent on House Bill 2186? Seeing none, I draw the committee's attention to the written-only testimony in your packet. We do have one listed opponent and would like to welcome to committee Emily Fitch with the Kansas Action for Children.
Of the walk-up music, if I can, but that's, I think, where our agreement might end. Good afternoon, Chairman Smith and members of the committee. I'm Emily Fetch, the Director of Fiscal Policy at Kansas Action for Children. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in opposition to House Bill 2186. Kansas Action for Children is concerned about this bill for three primary reasons, which are, we believe the bill picks favorites, creates loopholes, and fails to ensure that the bill will fulfill its purpose. So first, a change to the single sales factor formula would pick business favorites, which were just mentioned previously. The single sales factor formula would disproportionately favor businesses that have property and employees in Kansas but little sales. The current formula, the three-factor apportionment formula, balances property, sales, and payroll in the state. This ensures that corporations that are working in multiple states are supporting the state services from which they benefit. By just using sales, the single sales factor formula doesn't recognize that corporations with a substantial physical footprint in the state benefit more from those state services. Second, this proposal creates more taxpayer loopholes when Kansas needs to be moving to close loopholes. The elective option outlined in House Bill 2186 is the worst possible choice. It would sharply cut and potentially even eliminate tax liability for corporations that are based here while allowing out-of-state businesses to continue using the current three-factor formula that minimizes their Kansas tax liability. Elective single sales factor formula for manufacturers proved so costly to California that voters approved a ballot measure in 2013 to repeal it just 2 years after it took effect. Finally, House Bill 2186 fails to ensure that businesses are only eligible if they create measurable and significant in-state jobs and investment in the state. Corporations can benefit from this tax change even if they never create a single new job in Kansas. The tax cut is in no way contingent on future job creation behavior. If the goal is to create jobs or encourage investment, then I think the bill language should clarify this expectation. However, research does not suggest that this change would create jobs, which you can see in the table in the written testimony. Thank you for allowing me to share why Kansas Action for Children opposes the single sales factor formula as outlined in House Bill 2186. And again, it's because we're concerned that the bill picks favorites, creates loopholes, and it doesn't securely put into the legislation to make sure that the focus or the purpose of the bill will be done. And I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Emily. Representative Corbett?
Thank you for your testimony. But the question I have for you, do you have any suggestions on how to grow business in Kansas? I mean, that's what we just had a kind of a Crime Stopper event, but how do you have an idea to turn this around? Because if we don't have businesses, we don't have people coming here, and it hurts everybody. So, you have any idea on what we could do that you would like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important question. This is actually something that's related to some of my past work before I started at Kansas Action for Children, but I think that supporting entrepreneurs is really important. I think that research shows that entrepreneurs are actually the net job creators, so I think that focusing on strengthening entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs, the good news is that they like to start businesses where they already live because they know people and they know their potential customers, so I think that could be an area of focus, but yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you about it further.
Thank you.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. I show no other opponents. Is there anyone else wishing to appear on behalf of House Bill 2186? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on 2186 and move to our next hearing, House Bill 2148. And I would turn to the revisor's office for an overview of 2148, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2148 would provide a sales tax exemption for purchases of tangible personal property and services made by Gage Park Memorial, Inc. And these would go towards the purpose of preserving the memory of heroic acts and sacrifices of those Kansas veterans who fought, died, or are missing in action during the Korean War through the funding and establishment of fitting monuments and memorials. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Siebers. Pretty straightforward. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you for that.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for recognizing me. Just full disclosure, committee, Gage Park Memorial, this is in my district, so just wanted to let you all know.
Kathleen, did Department of Revenue have a fiscal note on this one? Okay.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, when we looked at this bill last session, we had visited with the entity, the Gage Park Memorial, Inc., and found that it would decrease the state revenues by $6,500 in fiscal year 2022. So we'd probably move that up again if we worked the bill.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Committee, any questions for Department of Revenue? Seeing none, we will move on to our proponent testimony and welcome first to committee, Teresa Thomas. Welcome to committee.
Mr. Chairperson and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of Gage Park Memorial Incorporated in support of House Bill 2148. If approved, this will grant sales tax exemption entity status for Gage Park Memorial, Inc. My name is Teresa Thomas. I appear before you today representing the Committee for Gage Park Memorial Incorporated. I have two committee members that are here with me today, Mr. Roland Mayhew and Mr. Richard Thomas, seated there in the second row. Our mission is the development and maintenance of the Gage Park Memorial, located at the northwest corner of 10th and Gage Boulevard in Topeka, Kansas. The centerpiece of the park is a statue titled Homage, representing all soldiers. A circular walkway surrounds this central statue. At present, there is a World War I monument and a Korean War monument. Currently under construction is a World War II monument. Future construction plans include Vietnam War and War on Terrorism monuments. Gage Park Memorial, Inc. engages in an ongoing fundraiser in which bricks engraved with a name can be installed in various sections around the walkway in exchange for $50 donations. Other fundraisers include an annual car show at the memorial and an annual motorcycle ride. The memorial has also received numerous direct donations from local individuals. Taken together, these proceeds make up approximately 95% of our monies raised. All funds go directly to construction and maintenance costs. All committee member efforts are on a volunteer basis, so there are no overhead costs. Passage of House Bill 2148, granting sales tax exemption for Gage Park Memorial, will have considerable financial impact on the ability of our organization to construct additional monuments to complete the memorial, including the current project of the World War II monument. Estimated cost to complete this current and the future planned monuments is $300,000 to $400,000 over the next 6 years. The cost saving to us from sales tax exemption will be significant. Next, I want to address the issue of human impact of the memorial park. I realize that this is in no way pertinent to the fiscal question before the committee, but I feel nevertheless it is a necessary part of my witness. The emotions of people who visit the park are so often visible in their faces and in the attitude of reverence for its meaning. This is especially true of those who come to witness the laying of a memorial brick engraved with the name of a family member or close friend. These witnesses have ranged in age from babies to persons in their 90s. Sometimes it will be a lone survivor on a very personal mission. On other occasions, it may be groups of 30 or more. Their reactions range from pride for service of the person they are honoring to open tears remembering the ultimate sacrifice of those killed in action. For some, just looking around at the monuments and bricks themselves brings up reflections on both the heroism of those who have served or are currently serving in the military, as well as of the horror of the wars themselves. Seeing these emotional gatherings brings home the true purpose of the Memorial Park, to pass on the tradition of honoring and remembering veterans. In closing, I want to thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee for your consideration of House Bill 2148, and urge you to advance the bill to the floor of the full House of Representatives for discussion and hopefully for passage on to the Senate. I'm happy now to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Teresa. Committee, any questions? Yes, Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're currently constructing a World War II memorial. How many more do you think you might be constructing?
There will be two more, one for the Vietnam War and one for the War on Terrorism. The layout of the Memorial Park, be nice if you all came to visit it, allows for five memorial monuments.
And do you have any kind of a timeline as to when these will be completed?
Well, we're estimating the World War II monument should be completed this year, and then we will have ongoing fundraising before beginning the Vietnam Memorial, which will be the next one, and then the last one. We're anticipating probably 5 to 6 years to get this completed.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions? Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I drive by here every day, so hopefully when the weather's nicer out, I'll be able to stop by and see it in person. Do you know just how many people on average go through the park a year? Curious if you guys know that.
I might
by
defer
chance.
to Roland for that. Numbers of people, how many bricks have we installed so far approximately?
Over 1,000 bricks.
Yeah, okay, so 1,000 bricks, but then we have other people that visit. We hold memorial services there, and they're very well attended also.
Okay, no, thank you. I was just curious. Thank you.
Any further questions? That
Mr.
was
Chairman.
for- Yes,
Chairman, this is John Alcala, and
yes,
I'm
go
on,
ahead. I was just going to check online.
yeah, the number of people that go to that memorial. So I come from a family of World War II veterans, and I'd say the number of people that go to that memorial are quite a few because one, we have the Topeka Zoo that's adjacent to the other end of the park, which is real huge with the mini train, et cetera. Also, we have the Blaisdell swimming pool, which is adjacent to the park, along with the Hills Pet Nutrition pet playground. And we also have Mount Carmel Cemetery, which is attached to that. So there's traffic through there all the time. I frequently go through there. I think it's a beautiful memorial. I would support this. I think it's a drop in the bucket for what they've done. And I think she said it all. If you get a chance to, you don't even have to stop. You can just drive to the intersection there of Gage, and you can 10th and Gage, and you can see the memorial. It's beautiful. And if the other ones are going to reflect similarities, I think it's a great deal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Alcala. Representative Helgerson.
You know, sales tax exemptions can be very cumbersome and difficult to get through at times. And have you ever gone to any of the agencies and just asked for an appropriation of that amount? So,
I'm sorry, what was the question?
have you ever gone to any of the agencies, tourism, commerce, anybody, and asked them for a contribution from the state to cover this rather than having a bill introduced to do it?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Committee, I have one written proponent. Is there anyone else wishing to appear on behalf of House Bill 2148? Seeing none, we will close the hearing, and committee, that concludes our business for today. Unless there is anything else that needs to come before the committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.